Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, Magic Johnson, and Jeanie Buss are preaching patience for JJ Redick. But how much can the Lakers really give? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free. It is never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom, Andy, are wondering how the Lakers are going to balance a lot of competing, what seem like competing goals, to win quickly, to have some development of younger players and plan for the future, and also to provide patience and runway for JJ Redick to become an outstanding NBA head coach. To that end, the Magic Johnson was talking with Jim Hill, legendary sports broadcaster in Los Angeles on KCAL 9, and he himself was talking about Redick and preaching patience with JJ. So we'll start there.
Yeah, he said, quote, "We as Laker fans," and Magic obviously includes himself among Lakers Nation.
Possibly the biggest Laker fan, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. There were times when he was running the organization where I'm not quite sure he knew the difference. But we as Laker fans got to give JJ Redick, our new coach, some time to really help him understand how to utilize the talent, how to coach the talent, and then also what schemes will work and what schemes won't work, because this is not going to be easy for him. But I think having LeBron as our captain, one of the greatest that's ever laced him up, and AD, they showed Laker fans and basketball fans around the world what they're capable of doing in the Olympics. And to that end, Jeanie Buss was on AM 570 in Los Angeles, the Fox affiliate, with Petros and Money, and also stressed the idea that JJ Redick, they believe in him. They feel like he's got a vision as a new coach, and that he's somebody that they really believe in his potential, but also said, quote, "I don't want to hype it and say that it's going to be a home run. We want to give him time to establish what he wants to establish. I'm really impressed with his staff right now." And then it's not mandatory right now, but that players have been coming in, working out, and that also that Redick, having spent, more than a decade in the league as a player, beyond what he did, calling games, stuff like that, knows what the league is about and that he'll be a great leader, but still emphasizing the idea that JJ Redick will need a certain degree of time to not just grow into himself as a first-time head coach, but quite literally learn what it is to coach players that are above 9 years old.
And, even with the new rules, Andy, you do have to be older than 9 to play in the NBA. And I do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's the thing with Magic got me just thinking broadly about, because he's not wrong at all. If you had let's say you switched Nate McMillan and Redick in their jobs. Redick is the associate head coach or whatever it is, and Nate McMillan is your head coach. New staff, new team. Nate McMillan would need a learning curve. Nate McMillan's going to have moments of feeling it out and all these other things. Any new coach working with a new staff is going to have growing pains where you just, you're not operating 100%. You don't quite see the right rotation. You're experimenting stuff. And so that's with experienced guys. With Redick, it's going to be bigger because he's never been, you don't know what you don't know. And so, sort of your brain, your intellectual brain is like, okay, yeah, guy's going to need a little bit of time to figure it out. We should all be patient. It's okay. It's all natural. But the problem is, Andy, they are counting on Redick to be essentially an instant improvement over Darvin Ham. And, it's not just by the time you get to the playoffs, it's also throughout the regular season, so that when you get to the playoffs, you're in a better position than you were last season.
True. And honestly, I understand what you are saying about Nate McMillan and a certain degree of learning curve, but to me, that's really more of a getting to know you period and just creating a comfortable player. But to me, that's
part of it. I'm not saying it's a steep, but that's all part of the learning curve. You are learning in the getting to know you sense.
Right. But that's not what's being taught. The point is, that's not what's being talked about with JJ Redick.
Call it an adjustment period, call it a learning curve, call it whatever you want.
But I think they're totally different.
Not even one. There's no new staff and new head coach that parachutes in and is instantly working it at optimum efficiency and has the thing dialed in. That's the point I'm making.
I think we've seen coaches who, with experience, that come in and get the thing moving pretty quickly, but
faster,
sure. but also too, what's being talked about though specifically with JJ Redick is patience to learn what the F it is to even coach. And that's not what's being talked about if, say, like in your example, Nate McMillan was the head coach. Nate McMillan, at the very least, has coached against this entire team on multiple occasions. He has, I'd have to go through the list of all the coaches, all the players Nate McMillan has coached before. There's a chance he's coached somebody on this roster. And beyond the whole figure out your players, like the best way to use them, where they like the ball, blah, blah, blah. If Nate McMillan, who's been coaching since roughly the Last Supper, had been hired by the Lakers, there would not be much talk about patience. There just wouldn't be, because you would expect Nate McMillan to know what he's doing in ways that you cannot expect. You can hope and you can anticipate, and you can have, we talked about this before, a feeling off vibes that JJ Redick actually will be able to shrink the learning curve more than most first timers, because he's going to have a feel and a command of the language and a command of the room in ways that others simply don't. But there is an element of, if, say, Nate McMillan or Scott Brooks had been hired to coach this team, you would not expect them to be attending Coaching 101. You might need JJ Redick to go to Coaching 101.
And
that's what's really being said.
That's the point I'm making.
As opposed to patience for Frank Vogel when he was hired, because I don't remember anybody bringing that up.
But that's the point, is the Lakers are trying to do two things at once that are really at cross purposes. And I'm not saying Redick's a bad hire. And it would have been something similar with Mike and Nori or David Adelman, less than Redick, because that a time as an assistant matters. But it's different than being a head coach. And so they would have had a little bit, and like every step you get further down the ladder increases that patience time in the way that you're talking about. And so what I'm getting at here is what you're saying. They are asking Redick to perform, maybe not saying it out loud, but the expectation is still also, we're here to try to win championships until I've heard differently. And so you have a head coach who is going to be in a position to be trying to improve on the other guy while starting from an experience curve that's way behind where anybody else other than like us would have been in this process. And so I don't object to the Lakers calling for patience, because it's warranted, and hopefully will pay off at the end. But after the break, I want to kind of dive more into this idea of what patience for Redick means for also trying to maximize the LeBron Anthony Davis window. So we'll do that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. Okay, the best concert I have ever seen in my life, George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, 1992, the Palladium in Hollywood. They played No exaggeration, 5 hours without a break. Bootsy Collins strolled through the crowd in his big platform boots. And ever since that show, I've been chasing a concert that could top it. Seen a couple that have come close, Prince at the Forum, Neil Young at the Greek, John Lee Hooker at House of Blues. And as I keep that quest going, I will always be using Game Time because they make it easier to get your tickets. You can actually look forward to finding tickets. I love Game Time's new feature like Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out all the confusing, flowery verbiage that you don't understand and just shows you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And they offer panoramic seat views, so you know exactly what the view to the stage will be like. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off.
Thanks again for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day. For your second, how about the Locked On NBA podcast? Because there is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts, including folks like us, in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. They are doing a lot of things at once, and I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what the alternative is necessarily. I mean, there are, they could be more quote unquote all in regarding player moves and this and that. But that said, it doesn't seem like there have been a lot of things out there that actually make the team better. You can make trades. You can always do bad things and things that maybe get headlines, but the idea is to make the team better. But that said, the Lakers are still talking about trying to maximize the LeBron Anthony Davis window. They are talking about patience for JJ Redick. They are talking about player development. At least in theory, some of these things are at cross purposes. It's hard to lean all the way into player development while you are also trying to maximize the window. It's hard to lean all the way into patience for Redick while you are trying to maximize the window and things like that. Where is the balance when you think about this problem, Andy? Where do you see the balance between the different things that the Lakers are trying to accomplish and how they can at least get as close to as possible to balancing all of it?
I mean, to begin, I think the player development thing, which they've been talking about a lot, I think in a lot of ways is signaling a lot of forward vision as opposed to what they are looking to do right now. Mm-hmm. Because while we've talked about before, there are ways that you can include Austin Reeves in player development, Rui in player development, Vando in player development. These are also rotation guys that we're going to be getting heavy minutes, regardless of whether or not you're even mentioning the words player or development. They're part of your rotation. And then when you look at some of the other guys on the roster, they only have so many youngsters. You know what I mean? Like they only have so many, like, I don't care how that look even ready to play minutes. Like, I don't care how much they're leaning into player development. Maxwell Lewis is nowhere close to being ready to get put on an NBA floor right now in minutes that matter. And I seriously doubt they're going to do it for the sake of player development. I think Max Christie is a perfect example of an emphasis on player development with the idea of just, this is a guy that we want to put in our rotation anyway. And in the face of this new CBA, he is somebody that if he can play up to the standards of what could become a bargain contract, that's somebody that we can develop who can help us win right now. They've talked about Dalton Connect as somebody they feel like can be in the rotation right now. That is developing a young player, but they're developing a player that they think is NBA ready now, as opposed to, say, last year when they drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino, who, no matter how much you believe in his potential, nobody could have expected him to be a 19-year-old one-and-done point guard ready to get serious minutes, and that was not the plan for him either. As far as like the patience for Redick versus the goal of winning as many games as you can with LeBron and AD still teamed up on the roster, like there's space between win now with 50 exclamation points and it's all about the future. But as we've talked about before, there's no point to having JJ Redick as your coach if you're not willing to think of this in a lot of ways like you would develop a young player, like player development, but with a coach. And, there are limits. If it's pretty clear 30 to 40 games into this, dude talked a really big game during the interview right. And sounds awesome on a podcast, awesome on a broadcast, but in reality, he's just all talk and all slick and has really no idea how to implement this incredible brain to coaching. You have to be willing to commit to this because for the sake of the big picture with this organization, they have to stop the revolving door at coach, because if they don't stop it really soon, they're not going to be able to find a good coach, because what good coach would want to take a job where it feels like you're always on the verge of getting fired? Like, right. If they're not willing to treat JJ Redick like a guy who's going to have to take his lumps in order to discover himself, like the best version of himself, likely in a few years, then just fire him now and find the next guy.
Oh, if they, I 100%, they are. If I realize I've been on a bit of a carousel here, and like Darvin Ham lasted 2 seasons when everybody thought he was going to last more than that. Frank Vogel lasted 3. He won a title. I mean, so it's like
Luke Walton was a hot commodity when they hired him.
Right. And in a vacuum, each time you can look at it and say, well, you got to make a change. Can't keep throwing good money after bad. Like, change need to be made. Like,
sure,
all that stuff. But it compounds to be like, and if you, 100%, if you go out and you get Redick, a first-time coach, in the most literal sense, like at this level, it's, not the way the kids say literally, like actually a first-time coach, and you fire him in 2 seasons, you will never get a decent candidate to come coach your team again. Or at the very least, every candidate who will consider you will also give far more consideration to that Hornets gig, to the Pacers job, to the Jazz job, like these other sort of mid-market, far more nondescript, still sought after positions in the NBA, as opposed to taking the Lakers job, because you'd have to be insane to throw your lot in with these people, like, because they clearly don't understand anything about anything, and you will not get a fair shake.
And you will always be the one thrown under the bus. There will never be a looking inward. It will always be coach's fault. Yes. We're never going to hold the stars accountable past a certain point, and we're never going to hold the front office accountable past a certain point. And you can't fire an owner. So guess who's getting bleep canned? It's one of these things where, like, unless he is showing up drunk every day, or like keeps insisting on putting 6 players on the floor, or designs offenses where nobody's allowed to dribble, or just gross incompetence where you just have to be like, he snowed us, man. Like, that interview was phenomenal. And he snowed LeBron. Like, he's that good of a con man. To be clear, I don't think the Lakers are planning on getting rid of Redick. I think they want him to be here for a decade, and they understand what this is. They hired a guy who's young, I think in part so they could keep him around for a very long time. And of course, that was the same thing with Darvin.
It's going to hit. It's going to hit. Actually, the same thing with Luke. It's the same. Vogel, not exactly an old man. Maybe they need to hire an 85-year-old coach. I don't know.
That's the argument for bringing back Phil.
Let him expire on the job. I don't know.
Jeez, I wasn't going to go there.
Just saying. Oof. I mean, maybe that's the better alternative. I'm just,
No, that's clearly not the better alternative. There's space between maybe considering an older coach who doesn't have a long future here and waiting for the coach to die while on the job, because that's why we hired him. There's space between.
There's one more thing that you said though about player development that I thought was interesting that people need to understand. We'll get to that, and maybe this Dwight and Phil Handy stuff that bubbled up. That is, because it's Dwight, always entertaining. That's next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's fall. The kids are back in school. And while they always complain about classes and learning, the reality is kids actually enjoy being challenged and finding their passions, learning about who they are. But it never feels like, as an adult, there's enough time to exercise your own intellectual curiosities. And even if there was enough time, you wouldn't know how to break through the walls that we all create for ourselves as adults. Well, therapy can help you learn about yourself and the ways to tap into the best version of you. And I can speak to how talking with a therapist helped me and my family during a really difficult period, helping us communicate better with each other, figure out compromises that don't leave you feeling unfulfilled or unheard. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible. It's a different experience for everyone. It can be suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
I think one of the things that is important to remember is that is that point you made about player development is that it's not if you're leaning all the way into it, you sacrifice minutes for Gabe Vincent and you give them to Jalen Hood-Schifino. You find ways to get Bronny 6 or 7 extra games at the NBA level that he might not otherwise get. Where he's getting, because I don't care what anybody's expecting. They're going to get this plays with father and son thing over with quickly, and then we may not see Bronny for the rest of the year, assuming there's not a lot of.
If he played 200 minutes this season, I would honestly be really surprised
At the NBA level.
Yeah,
I'm shocked if he played that much.
Very surprised.
Shocked, and it either means again the Lakers have had enormous injury problems, or they're doing this wrong.
There's always option 3.
Bronny's
they are kicking
good.
the bleep out of the rest of the league. And LeBron and AD and D'Lo and Reeves and Rui and the gang, they're always sitting. And that's why Bronny is playing 7 to 8 minutes a game.
No, because even then that requires him to be with the club every game. And he shouldn't.
Figured out after a while, man. This is the way this team steamrolls.
It's very Mandalorian. But he just shouldn't be there. He should be with the South Bay team, and we shouldn't even be getting the opportunity to come in. Those minutes will actually end up going probably to Hood-Schifino or Colin Castleton or somebody like that. But we'll see. Again, leaning into player development means taking younger players that aren't ready and giving them experience at the expense of older players because you don't care about winning or losing. That's not the kind of player development that the Lakers are going to be engaging in.
I think one way to think about it would be the Lakers, I think rightly, are seen as an organization that is always looking for the most ready-made version possible of not even just a championship roster, but just the most ready-made roster, period, where everything is right there, fully baked, and it's really just a matter of coming up with the best possible recipe to torture the metaphor. They're not a team that's thought of as looking to actually develop young players at all. The period, people talk about the period of the kids with Lonzo and B.I. and Randall and Kuzma, Hart, Nance, as a period where the Lakers were accepting the idea of development and leaning into tanking. And it's not what happened at all. A few of those picks, Ingram and Randall and D'Lo, they got those guys because they began the season chasing 8 seeds against all logic because they thought it was beneath Kobe to be on the roster and not somehow at least be in the playoffs. And then those plans kept falling apart and they would fall ass backward in the lottery picks. Like they never committed to the idea of developing players to keep as ours, as long-term parts of the organization. At best, they thought of what is the quickest way we can develop BI or Lonzo or D'Lo or whoever enough so that we can turn them into Anthony Davis. And I'm not arguing with the idea of turning those guys into Anthony Davis because it obviously paid off. And if you have the opportunity to get an Anthony Davis, that justifies moving Ingram and Lonzo and Hart. Like, that's fine. But you should at least at times be thinking about these young guys as part of your future run, because if nothing else, they can be cost controlled for a while. Like they can be a part of a roster that becomes more flexible and manageable. When you're always chasing ready-made, that also means you're always chasing the most expensive version of this possible. And that doesn't give you as many options. They seem to be now less prone to just cutting off the branches from, as you like to say, Brian, the option tree.
I think, and this makes me wonder how much of this is a change in philosophy, how much of this is recognizing maybe we didn't do a very good job of this before, how much of this is just using new words to do exactly the same stuff. Because, I mean, they have for years employed one of the most well-respected player development guys in Phil Handy, who's not with the team anymore, ironically, as they launch this crusade into player development. Like the kind of player development that I think they're talking about is a little bit what you're describing here. It's like, we're going to make sure that Jalen Hood-Schifino and Bronny James and Dalton Connect, to just talk about the super duper young guys, Maxwell Lewis, to, obviously he's still on the roster. You got to try to turn him into something, that can become an NBA rotation player. These are 4 players who ought not be in your rotation. Things are either going, like you said, incredibly well, or probably really, really bad if those 4 guys are in your rotation, barring something unforeseen, where one of them essentially just turns out to be way better, way faster. We're going to make sure those guys are on a program, that the way they're deployed at South Bay when they play is going to reflect what they're going to be asked to do with the big team. We're going to try to develop certain skills that we think those guys will need to have in order to contribute, not at the NBA level. And that might not mean scoring. That might mean taking Maxwell Lewis and having him improve his ball handling or whatever, any of these things. And Bronny James working on certain things that at the NBA level, doesn't matter if these guys score 26 a game on the G League, because that's never going to be what they do at the NBA level. So what are they doing down there? How does that fit? That's that group. Christie, Reeves, younger players like that are still in that kind of developmental phase, working on those aspects of the things that they need to be doing right now to try to improve that. Dalton Connect, adjusting from college, developing those programs. And that's all great. And that's the kind of player development that, quite frankly, every franchise should be doing. So it makes me wonder, were they not doing that before? And if so, okay, start doing it now, do a better job. Or is it like, how much of this is really different from what they've talked, how they were executing before? Did they look at it this way and fail to do it? Did they not look at it this way at all? Not give enough attention to it? I don't really know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, if you're looking for, I don't know the answer to your question, but if you're looking for just an example of the way things along these lines have slipped through the cracks, garbage time last season was not just garbage time because these were minutes that didn't matter. It was garbage time because like guys like Maxwell Lewis and Colin Castleton and JHS, when he was healthy, when they would get those minutes, it was a bleep show. It was just a completely disorganized bleep show. And they played with at times an alarming lack of urgency for guys whose NBA careers were hardly set in stone. But they also just looked at times like they didn't even know what they were supposed to be doing out there. Contrast that to like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when Alex Caruso was a G League guy who would sometimes get called up and play minutes either at the end of games, or there was a period where there were enough injuries that he started getting minutes out of necessity. Caruso looked like he knew what he was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that got everybody's attention about him quickly, including, by the way, LeBron's. During LeBron's first season with the Lakers, LeBron saw pretty quickly, hey, this dude in the G League team, I don't mind being on the floor with him at all. Like, he knows what's up. Like, he's got to learn a lot of stuff about playing at the NBA level and get some reps and whatever, but this guy clearly knows what's up. Something in the time between Alex Caruso, his garbage minutes as a G League player, and last season, some details weren't being, I guess, paid attention to in ways that they needed to.
I don't know, because how much that is, because like it seemed like Reeves kind of followed that same path. Like, oh, he knows what he's doing. It's like how much,
but he always spent time with the big club.
But how much of that is the player?
I don't know.
If it turns out Alex Caruso just knows what he's supposed to be doing,
sure.
Like I think, you know,
I'm just talking the example of guy spending time with the G League away from the club and seeming to have an idea of what to do versus, I mean, I'm not the only person who covers this team and observed like the third and fourth string for this team was, oh my.
No, it's terrible. And again, like how much of that is because Alex Caruso has a higher basketball IQ than Maxwell Lewis? I don't know. It's a nature versus nurture kind of thing, and there's overlap in the diagram. As the season goes along, as we get in deeper into training camp and stuff like that, I think learning some of these distinctions and learning like what is different about the emphasis on player development this year versus last year versus the year before versus, you know, is there really truly a philosophical change in how the organization is looking at taking the players that are on their roster and trying to improve them? Is there a change in the definition of success, like what the end game is here, what they're trying to develop them into? Maybe they've evaluated their player development and say, you know what, we can do better in this, and that's healthy. If they were doing it poorly before, okay, that sucks, but it's better to recognize it and try to fix it. I would love to know, and I think we'll try to learn as camp opens, what exactly is different. Is it just we're emphasizing player development in language because we have a coach that is also developing, and we have to have a longer time horizon now? We have to, I don't know. But it's something that I've been thinking about when Magic and Jeanie started talking about patience. So we did not get to Dwight and Phil Handy. There's some great reader mail that we want to respond to. So all of that stuff is going to be coming up this week. Make sure to answer a lot of your questions about this Lakers team and some time in the past as well. Do want to thank everybody again for making Locked On Lakers first listen of today. Go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. You can find the link in the show description. You don't even need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll see everyone tomorrow.